Okay, so it is 11 o'clock at night. I have been up doing a lot of different things before I started making this video. I am preparing to go to D&D and Castle next week, which I'm very excited about. They do cosplay there, and so I decided at the last minute to create a great axe from Baldur's Gate 3 as part of my cosplay prop. Yesterday, I had volunteered to teach some people that I've never met before in my life to teach them how to play Dungeons and Dragons at my gaming store. They invited some of their friends, so now I'm teaching 6 people, and I have to create characters for them. I still have to come up with a one shot for them. Been very, very busy, but I wanted to talk about the new Barbarian class that's coming out in the 2024 Player's Handbook for Dungeons and Dragons before I left for D&D in the Castle, because I just have a lot to say about that. I went to the press event that Wizards of the Coast held the Wednesday before GenCon, and everybody in attendance did get an early copy of the Player's Handbook, which I have with me right here. I am a slow reader, so I'm probably not going to be able to read the entire Player's Handbook in the next couple of months, but the first thing I did check was the Barbarian class, so let me share with you my thoughts on this. Now, usually with my videos, I will, do some editing. I will have some, B-roll. I would, add like layers or graphics or animations because it is late and I have so much to do. I just want to get this video out there. So this is just going to be kind of a stream of consciousness thing that I'm just going to kind of share with you my thoughts. I have it written down in an article already, and if you want to read it, I will go ahead and put the link to that article if you want to read it instead of listen to me ramble about this. But I'm going to use that article as kind of a guiding post on what I'm going to talk about. So yeah, there's probably not going to be a whole lot of edits. I might cut some things out just for sake of time and stuff like that. But bear with me. Hopefully this will be helpful for you and you enjoy it still. But here are some things that I thought about in the Barbarian class in the new 2024 rule set. But before I jump into that, I do want to say that as I was going through the book, there are some really great things that I really like about the book. First of all, this has a lot more artwork in this book than it did in the 2014 Player's Handbook. So, for example, let me go ahead and actually just show you the Barbarian class, which I just opened up to. It has a full page artwork of the female Goliath Barbarian that you all have probably been seeing here lately. And it's just really gorgeous. And then each of the subpaths, or I'm sorry, subclass, which are, the different paths, each path has a whole page, but half of it is an artwork that represents that particular path. And I thought that was really cool. And I absolutely love the art. It's very gorgeous. The only thing I wish that Wizard of the Coast did was include the credits on the artwork itself. They do have credits in the book of who worked on it, but I want to know who made some of this art because it's all gorgeous. And I just want to reach out to those people and say, hey, I love it. So they know. So that's one thing I wish they included in there, but the artwork is gorgeous. The layout here is also it looks like it's been done with usability in mind because it's much easier to read now than it did for the 2014 Player's Handbook. When I was reading the 2014 Handbook, it took me a while to kind of get through and figure out, what was going on with this class or this section because it loaded with a bunch of narrative stuff in front of it. So, for example, with the Barbarian, before you even knew what the Barbarian was, it gave you like 3 different descriptions of 3 different kinds of barbarians. That was, one was a human barbarian, one was a half orc, one was a dwarf, I think. Before you even got to know what a barbarian was, well, they just cut that stuff out and just got right into it. And I think that makes it very easy and more accessible for people who are new to the game to just jump in and get to know what is this class about or what is this rule about. So I think the layout of the book is definitely a huge improvement from the 2014 layout. So that's about the book. Let's go ahead and talk about the new Barbarian class. So the changes that they made with the Barbarian class has been numerous, and I believe is a huge improvement to what it was in 2014. So one of the first things that they've actually started off with is kind of rephrased rage to say that, it can be fueled by anger, but it's not limited to anger, which I think really opens up the door to do a lot of interesting role playing for a barbarian character that's not just always, oh, I'm mad, I'm going to attack everything, type of, stereotypical archetypal barbarian that you can play, especially when you have a path like the Zealot that's more oriented with, the divine, or when you have Wildheart that's more communing with the nature and everything like that. I think it gives a lot of opportunity to be able to decide what is the source of your rage come from? Like, yes, it's rage typically is associated with anger, but you can, kind of reflavor it to however you want. The other thing that I really love about what they changed with the Barbarian is that now all of the phrasing that they have for the Barbarian is in 2014 they're known to be like the melee combatants, right? Like they would go up to somebody and they would just smash, 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 and that's what they're known for. Now they've actually rephrased a lot of the attacks to significantly to say strength-based attacks and included unarmed attacks. I think they included unarmed attacks because there's probably some confusion about could they do this thing as a barbarian. But the fact that they changed it to strength-based attacks is a huge change and is a huge game changer because now things like your rage bonus for damage can include things like range attack. So if you want to throw a javelin at somebody, you can do that now as a rage bonus that you can add on to. Whereas in 2014 Barbarian, it was only limited to melee weapon attacks. If you want to throw a dead goblin at another goblin and add more damage with your rage, you can do that now. I mean, I know I love to do that in all the games that I play. But because they phrased it like that, now that applies to different, features. So reckless attack. Reckless attack used to be phrased as a melee attack. Now it's any strength-based attack. So you can do a reckless attack, take out your javelin, throw it at somebody, and now that gets applied to that attack instead of it being, in close range. So the Barbarian is now going to have a wider range of how they can use their rage and how they can use a lot of their benefits that goes beyond just, close-up combat. But now they can really be strategic and they can if they see somebody's about to, and then in a party that's about to get hit and might get, taken down and they can't get there to reach them, they could take out their javelin and try to do something to, help that party member out. So now it just allows the Barbarian strategically and mechanically to do a lot more than it used to be able to do. Speaking of rage just got better. Like it was huge and it was amazing in 2014. It seemed like they were just like, what else can we do with rage just to make it that much better? So the things that they have changed to make it better is that now, whenever you take a short rest, if you had used one of your rages, you can gain one expended rage and get that back. So you don't have to wait for your long rest to get all your rages back. So if you're doing kind of like a longer, campaign or a longer adventure that doesn't require you to take a long rest, but you're doing a significant amount of encounters, then getting that rage is a huge bonus, right? A rage now lasts up to 10 minutes, which is, there's pros and cons to that, right? Pros because it's longer. In 2014, it only lasts for a minute, but it does kind of limit some other things as well, too, because it does change the one feature where I think it was like Relentless Rage, where you can just be in rage all the time. But now with that feature, it's still going to be with 10 minutes, but the trade-off is there is a lot that you can do now being in rage. And one of them is you can use your rage for primal knowledge, which is new for the Barbarian class. You get this at level 3. And this fixes a lot of problems that people have pointed out where the Barbarian wants to intimidate somebody. Well, intimidation is charisma based. And a lot of times barbarians don't have that high level of charisma because they're putting all their stats into their physical traits, right? Now, 2024, if you are in rage, which again, you can make it last for 10 minutes if you want. If you are raging, you can use your strength bonus to apply to certain ability checks. So now that includes things like acrobatics, that includes perception, intimidation, survival. It also includes stealth. Now, how does rage improves one's stealth? Maybe they're just so angry that they just, hop up and like hang on to the ceiling, something like that. Maybe we're going to start seeing barbarians do like the John Cena, you can't see me now, and that's how they succeed in stealth. No idea, but I'm not going to question it. I love the fact that now you can use your strength bonus to apply to those abilities. I appreciate that they didn't just say it applies to any ability because I don't think it makes sense for it to apply to all of them, but perception, intimidation, acrobatics, like that makes a lot of sense for them to do that. So the fact that rage and now can last for 10 minutes, then you can really strategically think about beyond encounters and combats, how you can use rage to apply your strength to different ability checks. Like I mentioned before, reckless attacks now applies to range attacks. you can now use a bonus action to maintain your rage. So before, there was always these, funny memes about maybe I'll just punch myself and deliver damage to myself, so that way I can continue my rage. Well, you no longer have to worry about that. If you have a bonus action and you didn't attack somebody, then you can use your bonus action to continue your rage. Now, they did take away your rage being extended by getting damage. So the only way for you to extend your rage is if you make an attack, if you cause somebody to have to roll a saving throw, or you can use a bonus action to extend your rage. Now, when you enter into rage for the first time, you can actually go up to an additional half of your movement. So if you have 40 feet of speed and you go into rage, you can now move up to 60 feet because of that. I forget the name of the feature on top of my head, but that is something that is new that it will probably make a huge improvement for gameplay. Relentless Rage at level 11 now allows you to gain hit points twice the level of Barbarian. So before, it was if you went down to 0 and you made a Constitution saving throw and you succeeded on a 10 or higher, then you get 1 hit point. Now, when you roll a Constitution saving throw, you get twice, and you succeed, sorry, you get twice the amount of your Barbarian level. So since you get that at level 11, you're going to automatically start off at 22 hit points if you succeed, right? And then every level you go up, it's going to be an additional 2 and so forth. So that's going to really improve the level of play for Barbarian and make it like a little bit harder to kill in that regard. So I'm sure Dungeon Masters are probably going to ramp up their monsters and creatures to attack the Barbarian that way. And again, what I mentioned before with Persistent Rage, that you can go into Rage and stay in Rage for a full 10 minutes without having to do anything to extend your Rage. So by and large, Rage has just been improved immensely. There's a lot more fun things that you can do with it, and there are some exciting opportunities for you to really utilize those things, especially solving the problem about the Barbarian not being able to be good at intimidation because it was a charisma skill. In addition to Rage, the paths, the subclasses for Barbarian, are even better now. And my favorite path of Berserker got a huge improvement that I'm absolutely stoked about, because there was an issue with it that I had that made it almost non-playable for me because it was a feature that I never used. But now they made that change. I'm very excited about. But all the subclasses that they have in here, which is Berserker, Wildheart, which used to be Totem Warrior, a new path called Path of the World Tree, and Path of the Zealot, they are all great subclasses. So with the Berserker, the thing that they fixed with the Berserker now is the frenzy attack, okay? So in 2014, when you got the frenzy attack, that was something that you can use as part of your bonus action, that you can now make an additional attack as a bonus action. So once you got to level 5, you were pretty much shelling out 3 attacks per turn if you're using the frenzy attack. The trade-off is that after your rage ends from the frenzy attack, then you suffer a level of exhaustion, which means that if you suffer 1 level, then all of your ability checks were at a disadvantage. And that lasts until somebody casts, lesser restoration on you, or you take a long rest. So you had to be a little bit strategic about when you would use it, because you don't want to use it like early in the day, because then the rest of the day, you're probably not going to roll well with that disadvantage. But it does really put a damper on using that feature, and you had to be very strategic about it if you want to make sure that you weren't putting yourself at a disadvantage. Well, now with frenzy attack, you don't get the bonus attack, but you don't suffer the level of exhaustion anymore, because what they allow you to do is to deal more damage to one of your attacks. And I think it's the first attack that's successful, right? So if you're successful on your first attack, you get to roll D6s that are equal to your rage bonus, I believe. Yeah, your rage damage bonus. So if your rage damage bonus is 2, then you get to roll 2 D6s as an additional damage to that attack, which I think is a great trade-off, because now you don't have to worry about level exhaustion. You're still dealing out damage. Yes, you don't get that third attack, but when it all kind of evens out, I think that the third attack would have been just as much damage as when you're doing these 2 attacks and you get additional damage, especially once you get to Brutal Strike. You're dealing out that much damage that you're doing before, and you're not doing level exhaustion. So that is a huge improvement for the Berserker. Now, Path of the Wildheart used to be Totem Warrior. They changed the name. I think that was a great change. They desperately needed to do that. One of the things that I absolutely love, that's the huge change for Path of the Wildheart, is that they have made it a little bit easier to streamline the animal spirits that you can use for your different level of features for that path, right? So before there was some confusion about when you took your animal at level 3, that first of all that was a permanent thing, right? Once you took your animal at level 3, like you had to stay with that. People apparently, according to Jeremy Crawford, the game designer, thought that you had to stick with that same animal for when you go to level 6 and the other additional levels higher that you go in that path. Um, now what's interesting is that they kind of streamlined it to where each of the level ups that you get are different animals. So bear shows up still in level 3 still, but doesn't show up in level 6 or the other levels. And forgive me, I can't remember on top of my head right now where the other levels come in at. But now each level has a different animal associated with it, so you don't get confused. And at level 3, when you pick an animal to gain that additional ability or feature that they have, you can decide that every time you raid. So you don't have to stay with the bear permanently anymore. You can decide, I want to do bear for this combat when I rage, but then the next combat it probably be more advantageous for me to pick a different animal when I rage. So they give you more flexibility and more versatility with using Wild Heart. So I absolutely love that change that they made there. Path of the World tree is a brand new subclass for the Barbarian. And what's really cool about this one is that this is more of like a entombment with the cosmic world and the multiverse. And so this really gives the Barbarian a couple of strategic things. Is one, they can give temporary hit points pretty early on to themselves and to their party members. But there's also a lot of teleportation that's happening as well too. So they can at one point they can teleport themselves and other people in their party like up to 150 feet, and they can only do that once per long rest, and that's at level 14 if I remember correctly. But they also have a feature where if a creature enters into within 30 feet of them, they can use a reaction to cause them to roll a, I think it's either a strength saving throw or constitution saving throw. And if they fail it, then the barbarian can actually automatically teleport them to a space within 5 feet of them. And their movement is down to 0 now. So that is like a huge benefit. I'm curious to see what Dungeon Master is going to think about that feature, because I think that can really derail a lot of combat very quickly because of that. But I think that's really cool. And now with the reaction, you only get it once per round, right? So you're not going to do that every single time, and you can choose who does it. But 30 feet is a huge range, and that definitely is something that will change combat. And I don't think there's even a limit to that as well, too. I'm going to check that. If I'm incorrect, I will put a text layer underneath here as well, too. But I don't think there's a limit to how often you can do that. I think every round as a reaction you can do that. So that's going to be something that's going to be huge for the Path of the World tree. The last path of the Zealot, this is actually the path that I'm the most excited about to play in the 2024 rule set, because this was one that I never had an interest in, and I think the creators, or I'm sorry, the game designers for Dungeons and Dragons knew this as well too, because Jeremy Crawford actually said this specifically in a video interview, that the Path of the Zealot really relied on you dying and relied on you being able to do like things with other people, basically, right? So at level 3, it allowed you to be revivified or be resurrected, and allows a spellcaster to not have to use material components. Well, that was at level 3. Like, I think the resurrection spell is something that you don't get until like level 6 or higher anyways. And so that was a feature that really wasn't helpful at that level with other party members at all whatsoever. And so it was just kind of like a stagnant feature that a lot of zealots, Path of the Zealots probably had, unless there was a situation or circumstance where they had access to that sort of thing. Well, now what they've done is they pretty much changed it to where the Path of the Zealot has at that level a dice pool of healing opportunities for them, and so they have like 4d6s if I remember correctly. I'm sorry, 4d12s. It's actually 4d12s. And as a bonus action, you can heal yourself by rolling them, and you have to take a long rest if you want to get all of them back, but you have 4d12s to use. So if you've taken like a lot of damage, you can roll all of them, or you can just be strategic and roll them as a bonus action. But that is something that's a lot more playable now with the Zealot path than it was before. And so this is probably going to be the first path I'm going to create in the 2024 Barbarian, because this sounds a lot of fun and very exciting. And I can't tell you, like all the paths I think have just been improved significantly. I don't think there's anything that they changed that I don't like about with any of the paths that they have in this player's handbook. So those are the changes that I really enjoy about the Barbarian class. There are a few things that I think are going to be challenging, and one that I'm not that excited about. And so let's talk about the reckless attack and some of the other things that comes with it. So being a barbarian, it's very common that you use reckless attack at level 2, because you can use advantage for your attack rolls, which means that you're more than likely going to succeed every time you roll. Now, the trade-off is everybody else that attacks you until the start of your next turn also has advantage, but as being a tanky character, that's pretty common and that's expected. So that way you can deal out a lot of damage. Now, reckless attack is still intact. That's nothing has been changed with that. But there's been strategies that players use for playing a barbarian that has been affected by some other things that is tied to reckless attack that I think is going to make things very challenging. I know some people are probably not big fans of those changes as well too. First thing is, a lot of barbarians will take the feat Great Weapon Master, which in 2014 allowed them to take a -5 attack to their attack roll, and then if they succeeded, they get to add 10 points of damage on top of whatever they roll for their damage dice. So the change to the Great Weapon Master is that instead of how it is currently, where you can take the -5 and then add 10 if you succeed in your attack, and if you drop a creature down to 0 hit points or you roll a critical hit, then you get an extra attack as a bonus attack, right? 2024, you still get that critical hit benefit, or the reducing a creature's hit points down to 0 to get that bonus attack. You do get a ability score increase that you can increase your strength score by 1 up to a maximum of 20, but you no longer get the -5 attack for a +10 damage if you succeed. Now, when you hit a creature with a weapon that has a heavy property, you can cause that weapon to deal extra damage to the target. The extra damage equals your proficiency bonus. So that is a huge change, because if you have that at level 4, your proficiency bonus is still like, I think, around 3 at that point. So you're going down, you're going from doing 10 points of damage to 3, which is a huge shift, right? Again, you don't have to take -5 for the attack roll now, but that's why barbarians did the reckless attack all the time with the Great Weapon Master, because with those two things, you could take the -5 and you still probably have a very good chance of succeeding on your attack to deal the +10 damage. Now that it got reduced, I know some people are not happy about that. I'm indifferent. I think they took something away, but they give us something back. I like the increase to the strength score. I think not having to take a -5 to attack, I think, is a good trade off for something that's you still get extra damage that's reduced to your proficiency bonus. But I know not everybody's going to be a fan of that, right? Another change that's happened that it has a lot of people kind of up in arms about as well too is the change to brutal critical. It is now called brutal strike. So instead of getting an extra damage dice when you roll a natural 20 for a brutal critical, brutal strike now allows you to select an attack on your turn to forego advantage when you're using reckless, right? So you enable reckless, but you can forego the advantage part on your turn to try to deal more damage, essentially. And so that still allows other enemies to attack you with advantage. So you're giving up the opportunity to be able to roll with advantage in order to add more damage to it. People are not a big fan of that. I initially was kind of hesitant about it, but I actually like the change for a lot of different reasons. I think you just have to be more strategic about it now, right? So it says in this phrase in a way that says you can only do it for one attack, right? So I think that the benefit to doing it this way is that you're going to be more strategic about when you use it. So they really want you to use reckless attack more often. And so if you use reckless attack, and at level 9, I think is when you get brutal critical, at that point, you're doing 2 attacks per turn at that point. So if you were to use reckless attack and attack with the first attack and you succeed, then it makes sense to try to do brutal critical and then try to get that extra damage dice. So that way, if you do not succeed on that attack, at least it's not a complete turn where you did not deliver any sort of damage, because you can wait and see how you do on the first attack. Because if you miss on the first attack, then you can go ahead and do another attack and still roll with advantage and don't have to worry about missing that time, because chances are you're probably going to succeed that time around, right? So now when you when you use brutal critical and I'm sorry, when you use brutal strike and you are successful in attacking that creature, you get to roll a d10 for that damage, and you get to apply a property for that attack. So I think the property is forceful blow and hamstring blow. Okay. So you get to do like extra effects with that sort of thing. So I think this is a good trade-off for the brutal strike and brutal critical, because brutal critical was something that you could only do like 5% chance of the time, right? Like you had a 5% chance of being able to use that. So people who are doing the Barbarian didn't get to use this feature very often. It may have increased if you took that, that fighter champion feat. I think that if you multi-class, it reduces the critical to a 19 or 20, so it goes up to 10%. But Barbarians, by and large, didn't see that very often. Now they're going to see this every turn, essentially. So you're going to be dealing more damage consistently than when you had brutal critical. So I think this is a really good change. I think it's just something that you have to be a little bit more strategic about, because there are some new changes that, even though you're foregoing your advantage, your party members can do some things to kind of help mitigate, the advantage attacks that enemies are going to have on you. So at first, it seems like it was going to be a bad thing with all these changes, but with the Great Weapon Master change and the Brutal Strike change, but in conjunction with all those things, you're going from like having some, epic but very, very few moments of huge damage with the attack to now you're going to be delivering attack consistently that you're just kind of charging through. So you're kind of doing a marathon versus hey, I'm going to do a sprint for like 5 seconds and then, kind of trudge along as well too. So I think that's a good change. It's just going to mean that we have to be a little bit more strategic about how we use those attacks and think about those in those situations now. Now, the one thing that I'm not exactly wild about is I feel like they're caging the Barbarian, and they're probably not targeting the Barbarian this way, but I feel like as a Barbarian, you're going to be caged with the new character origins that they've created. So in character origins, you still get pick a species, which used to be called race. You still get to pick a background, and now each background comes with the ability score improvement. So it no longer ties to your species, but is now tied to your background, which I think makes a lot of sense, because your ability score should really be dictated by, your backstory as opposed to what species you selected, right? Because it would be fun to be like a Goliath wizard, but I imagine a lot of people be a Goliath wizard because they always have like the strength and constitution stuff that comes with them that doesn't really benefit the wizard a whole lot. And so tying it to the background made a lot of sense, so that way you can create a character that you really wanted to play. And with the backgrounds, you now get an additional feat to start off with. So usually you get a feat or an option to select a feat at level 4, 8, and 12, and 16. But with backgrounds, you get a feat right away, and they're selected feats. So it's not like you can pick any feat that's listed. There's specific ones that has the tag origin. And so those are the ones that you can pick. But every background dictates a feat. And I think that's where we're going to start seeing some problems, that people are going to start homebrewing some things as well too. So first of all, with background being tied to your ability scores, it's not one of those things where it's like Tasha's Cauldron of everything, where you get to select which ability score that you can improve with a, increase by 2 and 1, or, 3 abilities, increased by 1. Each background has specific abilities that you can increase. So you can't just select any of the ones that you want, which is not the end of the world. But the problem is, if you want to create a very interesting and kind of a original backstory for your character, then these backgrounds really limits you in terms of what you can do with that origin story. So for example, one of the ideas that I've had as a barbarian is that I want to create a barbarian who's also a librarian. Yes, that's a funny, play on words and stuff like that. But it's really honestly an idea that I had that I thought would be funny, where you have this barbarian that has like walking around reading books, has glasses, and then when it comes to combat, he goes into rage by like neatly folding his glasses, together, putting in his pocket, and then just goes, hell breaks loose after that part, right? Like I think it'd be a lot of fun to play a character like that. The problem is for the librarian, you have to have a background that makes sense to explain that, right? And so something like Sage would make a lot of sense, because in the Sage background, it talks about that background of having that person having access to libraries at different places and stuff like that. So the librarian should definitely be a Sage, but the the feat that comes with it specifically says magic initiate wizard. So it doesn't make sense for me to take that, because now I'm going to take a feat that I really can't do anything as a barbarian, because when I rage, I can't cast any spells. So it really is limiting you as a barbarian, if you're trying to be strategic about it, to the stereotypical things that a barbarian usually does, like soldier or guard, which is a new one, which I actually like that background. I think that'll be a lot of fun to play. But it really sticks to some of the stereotypes that goes with, playing a barbarian, that I want to have more creative control of the backstory of what my barbarian does as well too. So let's do another example. Path of the Zealot, right? Path of the Zealot is more geared towards a barbarian who is connected to the divine. And so for background, it would make a lot of sense for Path of the Zealot to have an acolyte background. The problem is the ability scores are all intelligence, wisdom, charisma, and a barbarian really relies on the physical traits like strength, dexterity, and constitution. In addition, the origin feat is magic initiate cleric. So again, that background would make a whole lot of sense to that kind of barbarian with that path, but it doesn't make sense mechanically to do it, because you're not really getting that benefit that really leans into you playing a barbarian. So this is where I think it really boxes you in from the character development point of view. And I think you're going to see a lot of dungeon masters say that, instead of playing these rules, let's homebrew it to say you can pick any background you want. You can pick any origin feat, so not just any feat, but any feat that is an origin feat. It doesn't have to match the background you selected. And you can pick any 3 traits that you want to improve by 1, or you can pick 2 traits that you can improve 1 by 2 and 1 by 1. I'm sorry, not traits, but abilities. You understand what I'm saying here. I think that's what's going to happen to allow players to have more creativity to create the kinds of characters that they want to play. Because the background, while as an idea, I fully support that it makes a lot more sense to tie it to the background. Putting these barriers around it definitely makes me less excited about the new changes they made with the background, and that I think it was a swing and a miss for me. So that was my ramble about the Barbarian class for the 2024 Player's Handbook for Dungeons and Dragons. Honestly, I'm very excited about it. I know I griped about a couple of changes, but I think those are very minute and minor, and that the benefits outweighs them by far, because I'm very excited about the improvements they made with the Barbarian class. I'm excited about the improvements they made with all the paths, especially my favorite one, Berserker, and I'm very excited to play Path of the Zealot that I had no interest in before. It'll be really interesting to see how some of the subclasses for Barbarian that's in other books will come into play here. For example, one of my other favorite paths I love to play as a Barbarian is Path of the Giant. What's interesting is that Path of the Giant allows you at level 3 to be able to add your rage bonus to a throw attack. And so now that the Barbarian 2024 has been phrased as any strength attack and not just melee attack, well, that benefit for the Path of the Giant is pretty much going to be null and void, because you already got that as a barbarian, right? So those are some things that I think will be interesting to look out for. It's not going to deter me from playing 2024. I definitely want to play these new rule sets and see how they go, especially with the changes that they made. So I'm very excited about it. I don't know if I'll do a full leap to I'm going to transfer everything over to 2024, especially with some of the games I'm DMing, because they're just learning the rules for the first time for 5th edition. I'm not going to switch them over to a new set of rules and confuse them even more. But I think for those who want to jump into 2024 and want to play a Barbarian class, I think there's a lot to be excited about. And I think anyone that had any interest in playing a martial class that dealt a lot of damage, or just something that's going to be a little bit more fun now, Barbarian's definitely one to check out. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you're excited about the Barbarian class for 2024 as I am. If you have any thoughts about the Barbarian class for the 2024 Player's Handbook, definitely leave a comment. I would love to hear what your thoughts are. I'm sure some of you will probably want to talk about the change to Brutal Critical, because I know that was the talk of the town when that change happened. But I'm very excited to hear what y'all have to say, and thanks for tuning in.